So if you were under a rock on Friday, you know that on this show, we've been tracking this NSO WhatsApp lawsuit. We've been tracking this whole spyware story for quite some time for a multitude of reasons, right? One, it's really interesting, right? It's a bridge gap between normal people and cyber people in a way, because a lot of people are concerned about spyware, and as such, they should. However, there is a line where going after a spyware with this precedent setting ruling from a Northern California judge finding NSO Group liable for their role in infecting the devices belonging to 1,400 WhatsApp users who were victims of the spyware. Now, the spyware wasn't operated by NSO. NSO didn't do it for personal gain. NSO sells that technology to governments. Said governments then use said technology in order to address threats to their homeland, to their leadership, to their rule in any sort of way they deem to be necessary based on what they deem to be necessary. And before a whole bunch of people here in the comment section start to go, well, it's Saudi Arabia. Well, it's, yeah, I get it. But they're a ruling government. We can, on one end, say, if you're a democracy and we like you, that's okay. But if not, because by the way, in the US, right, the Patriot Act was pretty much gave full legitimacy to Pegasus. And then if you want to hear worse of that, the Salt Typhoon breached a federal wiretap system in violation of a 1994 law passed by Congress to the FCC to ensure telecom security. So I don't want any of the, kind of sugarcoating of this ruling about justice. This isn't justice. And by the way, I don't think this ruling is going to stand going to the Supreme Court. And I believe NSO will take this to the Supreme Court. And I believe the Supreme Court will hear this case and will overturn it. Now, mind you, this is a civil case, but I think there's a greater interest here from a lot of different bodies on this specific ruling getting overturned. Now, no court before has ever found this liable, and obviously the filing was in a North California federal judge, which is predominantly kind of anti-business. It's known to be anti-business. Now, again, take that any way you want. I'm not saying that what NSO does is right or what WhatsApp here is doing is right. Either Meta-owned WhatsApp, whatever you want to name it. There's a whole bunch of there's a downside to each one of these. There's not a good option here. You do need spyware because in most cases, spyware saves life. And government that responsibly uses spyware does save lives. They're able to get into phones of alleged terrorists or criminal organization and stop something bad from happening before it actually happens. On the other end, you have some governments which abuse that power. But then again, they have their own way of rule. And this idea that everyone can live in a democracy or a republic like we do, or some of our allies do, is a fallacy in some parts of the world, particularly in this case. This is kind of the Khalid Khalouji, Tariq Khalouji, the Washington Post reporter who apparently Pegasus was used on his phone. He went into the Saudi embassy and obviously he came out in pieces, allegedly, right, in Turkey, in Istanbul, right? So of all of those things that have happened, right, around this case, there's good and there's bad, and you've got to weigh the two. I compare this to gun control. This ruling essentially says that the gun company is responsible for the murder, even though they didn't actually do it. Now, there's some evidence that actually NSO did have an active hand in loading the gun, meaning preparing the malware and helping even some governments deploy the malware on specific phone numbers. If that's the case, then there's a level of accountability that goes with that, but that level of accountability can't come from a third-party court, meaning it can't come from a country where the crime didn't occur. So again, this is, I think, part of what NSO will likely argue is, the state of California here in the Meta lawsuit alleges 1,400 victims, but none of them are really in California. None of the crimes occurred in California. And so the federal court in California in its entirety doesn't have jurisdiction over this case. This lawsuit should be brought up by the spyware victims in their countries of origin, and Meta should do the same in those countries of origin, which will likely be a case that might get, thrown out in appeal. The Northern California federal judge Phyllis Hamilton determined that NSO violated the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and the California's Comprehensive Computer Data Access and Fraud Act for enabling the hacks. The judge also found the group liable for breach of contract for violating WhatsApp's terms of services. So NSO did not originally reply to this, although in Israeli media, I did watch one of their founders actually talk about this, saying this is going to go to appeal. NSO will be appealing this all the way up, and as far as they could possibly go. And while this is a setback, it's, there's still a whole lot more. And by the way, I don't want to say I agree with them, but I agree with them. I think NSO will eventually win this on appeal, and we'll be talking about this for years to come on the show, right? So there's that. So arguments for damages will begin in March. According to court docket, we'll see what happens there. There's that story, and I see a lot of your comments, and I'm glad this is a passionate topic. It should be, and I don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me to state the obvious here for a lot of people there.